Sam Stevens has 20 years of NGO leadership experience in the humanitarian affairs and sustainable development sector. He was recently named the new chief executive of the AB InBev Foundation, guiding their grant-making efforts to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals globally. Prior to that, he was the chief executive of the Clean the World Foundation, leading the organization work in the water, sanitation, and hygiene space. He remains active on the Clean the World Foundation Board of Directors and is also engaged in other groups, including the World Economic Forum, Milken Institute, several UN and WHO committees and task force. Now he is based in New York, and his work has taken him to over 110 different countries around the world. And most certainly, Sam was a prior member of the Rotary Club District 7570. So that's a bonus. And then I'll just turn it over to Sam.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Marcus. Such a pleasure to be with all of you today. Wish we could be together in person, but it's great to be back in the Rotary family. As Marcus mentioned, I am a lapsed Rotarian. My club dissolved, club in Western Virginia, dissolved about a year ago. And in the midst of chaos and COVID and moving, I have not had a chance to find a new home yet. But as I get settled in New York City, look forward to doing that and visiting with you all in the future as a renewed Rotarian. But grateful to be with all of you today for a few minutes. Even though today I serve as chief executive of AB InBev Foundation, I'm going to actually speak for just a few minutes on my prior organization, which is Clean the World Foundation, which I still have the privilege of serving as a board member for that organization. I spent 10 years of my life leading and building up the work that we do in water, sanitation, and hygiene, which is obviously something very important to Rotary globally, and certainly something that we are honored to partner with Rotary on in a few different ways. So with that, I'll start sharing my screen here, and quick presentation we have. I'll keep it to 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to do some Q&A as well. So to begin with, oftentimes I'm asked, why is it so important to focus on water, sanitation, and hygiene? And of course, that's something that we're all very familiar with, given Rotary's focus on WASH. But just as a friendly reminder to everybody, why is WASH so important? Why are we focusing on it globally in our work at Rotary? And that's because today, still, 2021, the leading causes of death for children globally remain diarrheal diseases and pneumonia, which every day kill thousands of kids under the age of 5. And interestingly enough, the most effective way to prevent those deaths, proper access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, which can reduce incidences of diarrhea, reduce morbidity rates by 50% or more. So getting water, sanitation, and hygiene to populations that are most at risk from diarrhea and pneumonia literally can save thousands of lives for children every single day. At the same time, today, over 800 million people still lack access to drinking water around the world. And today, 2.3 billion people, that's almost a third of the world's population, lack access to improved sanitation and continue to practice unsafe things like open defecation. So again, WASH is so important to help address these issues, because these issues are causing not just health and humanitarian crises, but also preventing sustainable development, preventing economic growth in some of the least developed countries globally. And so water, sanitation, and hygiene really has the opportunity and the potential to not only transform lives, but also save lives. And so the work of Clean the World Foundation is focused on this, on getting universal access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, SDG 6, globally. And the reason I made the move to AB InBev Foundation is one of the 5 things that we'll be focusing on Our resources and a grant-making capacity is to fund water, sanitation, and hygiene initiatives globally. So WASH has been and will continue to be a large part of my life personally, not only through Clean the World Foundation and Rotary, but through AB InBev's Foundation as well. And I look forward to guiding those efforts. But Clean the World Foundation, quick history, was founded in 2009. And it was actually started by what is today a B Corp, a for-profit benefit corporation based in Florida, that started with the concept of recycling leftover soap in hotels. So some folks, like I'm actually traveling this week, I'm in a hotel at the moment. Hotels throw away used soap and partially used bars of soap, partially used bottles of shampoo and conditioner. And the founder of the organization realized, well, what happens with all this stuff? As you think of millions of hotel rooms around the world every day, they're throwing away perfectly good, barely used bars of soap. Understanding at the same time, the leading causes of death for kids globally can be prevented by access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, including soap. And so from the juxtaposition of these two issues emerged Clean the World, which started by recycling this discarded soap, creating new soap, and then leveraging those freshly recycled bars of soap into humanitarian emergencies globally. Fast forward a few years and Clean the World bifurcated. The B Corp remains, the benefit corporation remains today recycling discarded amenities from the hospitality industry globally. But Clean the World Foundation exists as a separate independent 501c3 nonprofit based in Washington, D.C., that focuses on water, sanitation, and hygiene programs globally. So separate from the B Corp, in that it's a separate 501c3, separately funded. Most of the funding for the organization is raised through grants and corporate sponsorships and individual gifts. And the organization today focuses on four broad things that cover not only the humanitarian aspect of WASH, but also the sustainable development, the international development aspects of WASH. In the international development side, you have WASH infrastructure and education. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but these are multi-year programs and partnerships working in some of the world's least developed communities, equipping them with the resources and the training and the know-how necessary to create sustainable long-term access to water, sanitation, and hygiene for their communities. We also do women's microfinancing alongside the infrastructure and education programs, providing long-term, sustainable, dignified sources of income for women in these least developed communities so that they can create supplies that are leveraged in these programs while also creating a source of income for them and their families. On the humanitarian side of things, we continue to do emergency relief. Globally, responding to natural disasters and humanitarian crises, as well as providing emergency relief for vulnerable Americans. We'll take a look at all of these in a little bit more detail. So on the international development side of things, Clean the World Foundation does quite a bit of work in infrastructure and education. This is sort of the signature issue. But we approach it somewhat uniquely and approach it very similarly to the way that Rotary works. And that is by, instead of coming in and saying, hey, impoverished community, this is what you need, we're going to do this for you. We actually work hand in hand with communities that are at very high risk for the spread of diarrheal diseases and pneumonia, communities that lack access to continuous water, improved sanitation, ongoing hygiene, things like that. And we work with this community to help understand what their needs are. So give them a voice in articulating what they need, what challenges they're having, what problems they have. And then we work with them once we've understood what their needs are, once they have had a chance to tell us what it is that they want. We work with them to design programs that last multiple years that address these issues related to water, sanitation, and hygiene. We train those communities, we hire community members to develop whatever access they might need to water, ongoing 24/7 access to water, whether that's rain catchment systems or purification systems or borehole wells, solar powered wells and pumps, things like that, as well as the piping and the plumbing necessary to provide access points to the broader community. We work with them to achieve this access and then train them to maintain those systems so that once the program is over, that impact can sustain itself long term. Same thing with sanitation, training them to build toilets, training them to maintain the latrines and the toilets so that they can be used long term. Same with hygiene, installing hand washing stations and taps with soap, providing ongoing access to those supplies. And then most importantly, the educational elements around that, conducting community-wide water, sanitation, and hygiene trainings within schools, within community centers, within clinics, so that we seek to change behaviors, because access to these resources is part of the equation, but perhaps equally important is the knowledge about why these items are so important, how to maintain them, how to use them, and why they're so critical in maintaining proper health and incorporating these practices into their lives every single day. So again, multiple years these programs take to get up and running and fully ingrained into the community. But then we're able to hand these programs over to the community so that that impact can sustain itself long-term without reliance and dependence upon outside resources. So we work in programs like this across Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, Latin America, and through these efforts, we've seen impacts like a 97% decrease in diarrheal diseases for a specific community, increases because of that in school attendance by 60% or more. And so we're very proud of the work. We're very proud of the approach that we take to make this program so successful. And we're also proud to have partnered with Rotary. We were the beneficiary of a Rotary Foundation grant, a global grant in partnership with a couple dozen different clubs from throughout the United States in setting up a comprehensive wash project in rural Uganda. This was actually the home village of the Sam Awori, who was the Rotary Global president, who unfortunately passed away. And in his honor and memory, we're able to launch this project to bring his home community and his home district ongoing access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And in partnership with the local Rotary clubs, Rotary was able to build the water access. You'll see there, 40,000-gallon water storage tank with solar-powered water wells to provide this community ongoing access, as well as taps installed at schools and community centers and clinics throughout the district. And then also toilets and latrines installed at the schools and the clinic in the community. The Clean the World Foundation was able to come in and provide the hand washing stations, the wash supplies, the ongoing multi-year education, as well as the impact measurement. So this is an initiative that started in 2018. The handover ceremony just occurred back in June. So this project serving 20,000 people is fully self-sustained now. And so the local Rotary clubs are continuing to monitor the efforts, but today this community now has ongoing access to water and sanitation and hygiene, and we've seen decreases of diarrheal disease, over 65% decrease thanks to this project in this community. So very, very proud of that. In the humanitarian aid side of things, Clean the World Foundation, very involved in responding to natural disasters and crises around the world. Anytime that there is a situation where the local supply chain has been disrupted and is no longer capable of meeting the needs, we can step in with temporary resources, temporary access to these critical supplies until the local supply chains come back online. So if you think about aftermaths of storms or earthquakes or whatever the case may be, access to water, sanitation, and hygiene, absolutely critical for maintaining personal health, for preventing the spread of life-threatening diseases. And so because of our relationship with the United Nations, we serve as a global member of the Global Wash Cluster of the United Nations, are able to strategically stockpile and pre-position these supplies so that in the aftermath of a disaster, when local supply chains are incapable of providing and meeting the needs of the local communities, those who have been affected, we can step in and provide these supplies short-term until those local supply chains are back online. So again, we don't want to flood a community with supplies just for the sake of responding. We only want to step in strategically in those situations where the local supply chain can't meet those needs. So oftentimes, refugee situations are also times when we're called in to assist anytime you've got a displaced population. So we work globally to respond to any of these types of things that might be necessary. COVID was a big and continues to be a big situation that disrupts local economies, cuts off local supply chains, and so we're able to step in and provide these supplies for a short period of time until those local resources are once again active. And of course, alongside the distribution of the aid is the ongoing education that we can provide to make sure that people understand why these supplies are so important for maintaining positive health now and in the future. We also do women's microfinancing. So Clean the World Foundation supports women entrepreneurs in the communities where we work, usually in conjunction with the WASH infrastructure and education, but sometimes in conjunction with the humanitarian aid and emergency response. So providing small startup loans to help women launch and successfully run businesses that provide WASH supplies within their communities. So everything from soap to water filters to hand washing stations or reusable menstrual pads, whatever supplies are critically needed within the community that the community currently doesn't have access to, instead of importing all of these supplies and just handing them out for free, we train local people, local women to run businesses that make these supplies and sell these supplies back to the community. So we can create dozens of new jobs for women in the community so they can have a dignified source of income for them and their families, while also making sure that the community has access to the WASH supplies that it needs to maintain good health long-term. And then finally, the work that we do is not just globally focused, even though that's about 90% of the work that gets done by Clean the World Foundation. Working in the United States is still very important to the organization. And so today we operate in a few different ways. One is through a program that provides mobile showers to people experiencing homelessness or people suffering from low-income situations. Picture a tractor trailer that has in the trailer of the truck 4 showers so that people can go in, get a shower, get clean, get access to whatever they might need to maintain their own health and their own dignity. And then as that truck parks on site, we can provide case management, referrals to whatever resources they might need, from treatment services to employability services to connections to housing and things like that. So we currently operate that in Las Vegas as well as in Central Florida, Orlando, with plans to expand that mobile shower programming fairly substantially in the months to come, because it is such a great resource for the community because people just don't have access to showers when they're living on the streets or they're living in their cars. And so it's a resource that we can provide to meet those needs, not only from a health standpoint, but also from an economic empowerment standpoint. When COVID hit, we partnered with the CDC to set up WASH stations for people experiencing homelessness. So that's what this image is on the screen here. It's essentially porta potties and hand washing stations that we can set up in homeless encampments throughout the United States so that they have access to proper hygiene and sanitation. What we saw was when COVID hit, oftentimes the people or the places that these folks were going to, that they were frequenting in order to gain access to hand washing or toilets or what have you, shut down. They prevented people from coming in because of the spread of the disease. And unfortunately, proper access to sanitation and hygiene is critical for preventing the spread of diseases. And so when you had a population that was that much more vulnerable to COVID, their access to WASH was actually restricted even more. So the need went up, the supply went down, and we were able to step in partnership with the CDC and set up access to porta potties, access to hand washing stations in homeless encampments throughout the United States, serviced several times a week so that people could have 24/7 access to proper sanitation, proper hygiene practices, make sure that they and their loved ones and their friends could stay safe as they faced the onslaught of COVID. And so look forward to expanding that programming as well. And then in partnership nationally with food banks, with pantries, with homeless shelters, with other response organizations like the Red Cross, continue to provide them with the supplies that they might need so that populations experiencing crisis can have access to whatever wash supplies might be necessary. And so those national partnerships are certainly very critical to the work that we do in the United States. Oftentimes folks will ask, how can you help? And as we wrap up today, just planting the seed, if you're interested in learning more, please visit the website, cleantheworldfoundation.org. The greatest need, like most NGOs, is financial support, but making an impact is easy. The gifts that are very small can have a very large impact. When things recover from COVID, we need 20,000 volunteers a year in the various warehouses that we have globally. And so invite people to go in and volunteer there, or to take a trip to visit the programs that we have, including the program in Uganda that was supported by Rotary International Foundation. Would love to go back and see the work that's been done there, and also share the story of the organization, follow it on social media, and tell others about the good work that's being done there. So the contact information is right there on the screen. Cleantheworldfoundation.org is the website. Visit it, check it out, see the great work that's being done there. The email address for the organization is there as well, so feel free to reach out with ideas or if you're looking for more information. And then my contact information, my new email address is down there as well, sam.stevens@abifoundation.org. So feel free to reach out to me as well with any thoughts or questions or concerns, and I would be happy to do whatever I can to help connect you to the organization and the work that's being done there. So I'll also drop this into the chat so that you have access to this and make sure that anyone who wants to reach out can do so. So with that, I'll wrap up and would love to turn it over for any questions that the group might have.
Yes, Sam, thank you for being with us. You have a very comprehensive program worldwide, and we're very impressed by the work that you're doing. Looking at the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, what do you think would be the top 3 things that we as Rotarians and we as Rotary clubs really ought to think about, and how can we actually help and assist in achieving those 17? But what 3 things do you think of would encapsulate how we could best do that? And thank you again for being with us.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Such a pleasure to connect, and incredible question. Great question. It's something I spent a lot of time thinking about as well. And so I would say, when I think of the top 3 things, I think number 1 would be, continue the approach of working with communities to understand their needs throughout the 17 SDGs and the spectrum that it encapsulates. But focus on asking the community what they need, and then working with them to meet those needs, as opposed to sort of a top-down routine. I think number 2, really seeking to understand what are some of the neglected issues that are out there. What are some of the philanthropic white spaces, as we like to call them, and really making sure that we can divert some attention, some awareness there. Thankfully, WASH is a focus for Rotary and is globally a neglected issue. Water access is fairly popular. A lot of NGOs out there focused on that, a lot of groups building wells in Africa, but not necessarily doing it in the right way. Africa is littered with abandoned wells or broken wells, and communities throughout Africa, throughout the developing world in general, have, through the best of intentions, been neglected long term and been left perhaps no better off than they were before the projects began. So coupling that approach of understanding what the community needs with understanding what are some of these issues that other people are not addressing, that we can perhaps step in as Rotarians and support, not just issues, but also communities as well. Where are there neglected communities, neglected issues coupled with that approach? And then the third thing I think is making sure that the work that we do is truly sustainable. Instead of just doing a sexy, hey, here's a grant, congratulations, and then a year later it's done and you get the final report and there's a nice handover ceremony and everything's finished. I think really being cognizant of the multi-year monitoring and evaluation to make sure that there's a sustainability plan in place so that the impact that gets created, which is a fantastic impact, truly does get sustained long-term and can be sustained long-term by that local community. So all great things, all things that Rotary, I think, is very cognizant of, which is why I'm proud to be part of the Rotary family. But I think just good reminders about looking at the neglected issues, neglected communities, working with the communities instead of a top-down approach, and then truly making sure that the communities have what they need to sustain that impact themselves long-term. So great.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Sam, thank you so much for a very good presentation and all your good work to making the world a better place. What is your overall approach to nation states to gain their support around the world?
That is such a good question. And it is, it is such a complex answer. I think to the extent that we can, globally, I personally and the organizations I work with always welcome the buy-in and support of the local governments. And in many cases, we're very fortunate to have that. So the approach that we always take is before we go into these communities, before we start working with them, having the official meetings with the governmental leaders, having the official meetings with whatever ministries or departments might have relevant oversight or vested interest in the work that could be done. Sometimes even signing MOUs with the various departments and ministries to get their buy-in and support. And so in the best of times, in the best of cases, we can work alongside them to get their support and to get their on-the-ground encouragement and on-the-ground enforcement of the work that's being done. So sometimes you can see a very collaborative partnership with the various ministries and departments working alongside us to make these projects successful in the short term and the long term. So again, that's the best of times and the best of situations. Even in the worst of times, we still start with that approach of informing the community that we hope to work there, inviting their ideas and their thoughts and their suggestions, inviting their participation. Unfortunately, sometimes the buy-in isn't there, or the interest goes in a different direction, or they hope to get something out of it that maybe we had not intended to provide. And so in those situations, maybe we don't work with the national government or the regional government. Maybe it's more of a local government standpoint, but across the board, we try to meet with national, regional, local leaders, get their buy-in, get their support, and then whether they choose to work with us or not, at least they're aware, and at least we can incorporate them into our planning in one way or another to make sure that the project can be successful long term, and understand what support they can provide to do that or not provide, and then we know what resources will be necessary to encourage that long term. Good question.
Sure.
I did have a question regarding, because I'm very impressed by the scale of the work getting back to the Clean the World Fund. How you get your funding, because of the scale of it, it must be, though you mentioned the individual donations, which are a big part of many nonprofits funding, you must surely be getting some government funding. How do you arrange for other sources of funding besides individual funding?
Fantastic question. Fantastic question. Yeah, we're very fortunate that we do have a variety of different partnerships that we're able to work as a part of to get the funding that we need to get the job done. Mm-hmm. First, for us is the approach that we take. We want to make sure that as much money as possible goes to the communities that we're serving, goes into the programs that we're operating. So we're very proud that about 94 cents of every dollar goes directly into programming. Only about 6 cents goes into fundraising and overhead. But we do have a fundraising team because we do need resources. We do need money to operate these programs. So we do have a fundraising team that's tasked with and charged with going out and finding new partners, going out and finding new supporters. Most of our funding comes from foundations and corporations across the spectrum. So Rotary International Foundation at a high level, all the way down to individual Rotary clubs. But then also, a wide variety of other different foundations throughout the United States and globally that support our work, as well as corporations that are looking to be a part of the impact that we're making. So about 90% of our funding is corporate and foundation related. But I would also include within that 90% of the funding the government partnerships that we have. For example, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a large partner of ours for the past 18 months or so. So certainly included in that. And then about 10% of what we do is funded by individual donors that are looking to help us make an impact in the United States or globally. And so we're able to direct those funds, or we're able to include them in the unrestricted pool that goes to support some of the neglected projects that we have globally. But we're proud to have hundreds of supporters across the spectrum, thousands probably of supporters across the spectrum, corporations, foundations, governmental entities, and individuals looking to help us make a difference. But it's taken us about 10 years. And a dedicated team of staff to proactively pursue those relationships to get them to where we are today to help underwrite our work.
Well, congratulations in both arenas. And it sounds like you made a good transition now to the ABI Foundation, actually InBev. And I'm familiar with that because part owned by the Brazilians. Those of us who enjoy a good beer from time to time, know where the money in that case is coming from.
Absolutely. Yeah. AB InBev is committed to having one of the 5 to 10 largest corporate foundations globally. And so we're going to be making a big splash, no pun intended, in WASH and in sustainable development goals. But AB InBev, hundreds of different brands, everything from Corona and Budweiser to others, about 700 brands globally. And I'm actually in Brazil this week, down in Sao Paulo for meetings. And so definitely very much a part of that family now globally.
Well, thank you. That's my home away from home. I go there. So we're reaching the end. It's just a minute to go. Sam, we have a tradition of honoring our speakers with the planting of a tree on the National Mall or in one of our downtown parks. We do this in partnership with the National Park Service. Been doing for some 30 years. And we now have a new capability that we can actually tell you where your tree is. So, and we will invite you to the next tree planting ceremony. If you happen to be back in Washington, D.C., you could come and join us, all right? So we'll be putting in the mail to you a tree certificate signed by me and the chair of our Trees for the Capital program. It's been delightful having you with us. And as I said, once we hope to be back meeting in person at the University Club, come join us sometime. So thanks again for speaking. We enjoyed your remarks today. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned.